Hi guys, Claudia Boleyn here, and this is the second of my vlogs about my progress through BPD therapy. So, as you probably know if you're watching this, I am doing the STEPS program, which is a group therapy program for people with borderline personality disorder, otherwise known as emotional intensity disorder and emotionally unstable personality disorder. So, much was learned today. I actually found this one incredibly valuable because I think last week it was very much introducing us to everything, and in some ways it felt quite basic, but I'm glad we did it because I think today's lesson started in the same way. Like, I kind of came into it and it started out quite basic, and I kind of thought, how is this gonna help? Like, being honest, I kind of thought, well, how's this gonna help? Like, this is just so basic, like, I don't need to know this. And then I kind of like was patient and I kind of went through the session, and then about a quarter of the way through it suddenly clicked and I thought, oh, wait a minute, this makes sense. I don't want to just rip off the therapy by just reading you all the worksheets, which actually it would be brilliant if I could, because, you know, there's a waiting list for this and it's not fair, but at the same time I don't want to be done for copyright, so I'm sure you can understand. But I'll kind of rephrase and just talk about what I've learned from it, and hopefully it might help you as well. So today's lesson was called Lesson 2, Filters. Oh look, it's my name tag. We did wear name tags again today, but it's because the other guy running the group, it was his first time, he was ill last week, so yeah. So, at the start of every week, what we do is we do something called BEST, which is Borderline Evaluation of Severity Over Time, which is essentially just a chart where they ask us about our thoughts and feelings during the week, our behaviours that are negative and our positive behaviours, and we basically add them up and it gives you a score, and we put it on a chart and we can see if we're roughly getting better or getting worse. I'm still on the fence about whether or not this is going to work, because I feel like I've actually had a better week this week than last week, but I ended up with a much higher score, because I know that with people with BPD it can very much depend on the mood you're in at the time. So at the time you're filling in the form doesn't necessarily reflect how you are all week, so I don't know if that's necessarily something that's going to work, but again, I'm sticking with it. Okay, so filters. I didn't really know what filters meant when I started this, but it's actually quite easy. So they're kind of different areas where we might struggle emotionally. So they kind of put these different insecurities and issues that people with BPD have in common and kind of group them into like little sections, and we had to do a questionnaire, and at the end of it we added up our own scores and we saw what categories we found particularly difficult, because during the programme we're going to focus on the top 3 for us, because obviously everyone with BPD is very different, and like there are people in the group who suffered with stuff that for me was kind of quite low on my radar, and then some things I was putting my hand up for and I was like one of the only people in the room. So it's a really like unique thing. That is something I like about this programme, because it kind of, it's being taught to us as a group, but you apply it to your own individual life. So I'm going to stop rambling and get to the important bits. So the different categories that are involved in this are emotional deprivation, abandonment, mistrust, defectiveness/social undesirability, failure to achieve, vulnerability to harm and illness, self-sacrifice, subjugation, unrelenting standards, and entitlement. So I will explain what these mean. In fact, there's actually a bit of a definition of a filter here, and I think I can read this because it's referenced itself, so it's been taken from something else. So, a filter is an extremely stable and enduring pattern of thinking that develops during childhood and is elaborated throughout an individual's life. We view the world through filters. That is from J.E. Young's Cognitive Therapy for Personality Disorders, so you can't get me for copyright. So essentially what I learned about filters is that filters are sort of ideas that we can have about ourselves that were ingrained in us in a young age. So we might not have even realised we picked these ideas and beliefs up, and they kind of change how we look at the world. So it kind of changes our perspective on the world and the way we think. And these are the kind of things that people without BPD, they might also experience elements of these, but I don't think to such a degree where it kind of impacts their life the way it does for us. Filters are also, they're usually outside of our awareness because they're so ingrained in us, so they're not something we would recognise unless it was pointed out. Now, I already was aware of some of mine because I've done therapy before, but it did take going into therapy and doing the research to find out what the issues were in my own head, because I think we all have been conditioned in different ways and have adapted to the situations we were in different ways which aren't necessarily healthy for us. Not always, but usually people with borderline personality disorder have gone through something that's quite traumatic as a child, and it's kind of caused them to the way they think about the world changed in a way that helped them survive that time. But once that time was over, they were left with that, and that's how they deal with the world. And so it's meaning that we develop these kind of survival instincts in a way, but they're not helpful anymore, because the world isn't that terrible, dangerous place for us at this time. But the way our brains got wired and the way we learn to exist, it's not helping us in the adult world. Something which is also covered in this, which I'm really glad is the idea of being triggered, because I know it's like this internet joke at this point and everyone uses triggered every time someone gets angry, but it is a real term and it is used in these real programs. Like we were talking today, just briefly, about things that can trigger us, and we're gonna start to understand our own triggers, and it's a real thing. So it really bugs me that you can't talk about that kind of thing anymore, because people just have turned it into this joke. Like it is a big deal, and triggers are a real thing, because they are often people who have mental illnesses or personality disorders have often been through some sort of trauma, and you have triggers to do with that trauma that can set you off into like a spiral. I'm just going to read this bit. It says here about filters: they allow us to survive, but not to heal or recover. And that's kind of where I feel I'm at. I feel like I have learned a way to survive, and my personality has developed in a certain way, and it's letting me exist, but I'm still in that place of fear that I was when I was a child. So I just, you know how I've spoken before about feeling like an eternal child? Like having BPD makes you feel like that. And maybe that's part of why. I think maybe because it's put us into this kind of this idea of like stagnation. Like we're at one point and we're not progressing, we're just sort of stuck there. So I think it's given me hope that actually at the end of this process I might feel more adult and more able to deal with things. And it also makes me feel less guilty, because there's a lot of guilt that can come with having BPD, and you feel like, well, why am I like this if everyone around me is fine? And you start to realise, wait a second, it's not my fault, it's just something that my mind developed to help me survive and cope. And thank you, brain, for doing that, but we don't need that anymore. We're taking control now. So I already read you the categories, but I'm going to summarise them for you. So again, I'm not going to like rip this off, I'm going to summarise them. So for example, emotional deprivation is one of the unhelpful filters, and it's basically, I'll never get the love I need. So this is when you might think that no one is ever going to be able to love and care for you the way that they should. You're just never going to find that. It's not a real thing. You're going to be alone. It's pretty depressing. And it can kind of happen in some instances, not all, but in some instances maybe because a parental figure or someone around who was looking after you, maybe even a teacher or something, they didn't give you that love. And so you've learned in your head to think, oh, okay, there is no love. No one's ever going to love and look after me. I'm doomed. This isn't actually one of my big ones. Like I do feel like I do worry that I will never find someone who like loves me like completely apart from my family, because I kind of feel like my family have to, and I know I'm incredibly lucky because some families aren't like that. You know, I know my family will love me no matter what, which is amazing. Like I really love them for that. They're so supportive in that way. But I also think to myself, well, they only love me because they're my family, and if they weren't my family, they wouldn't love me and they'd probably leave me, which is a BPD thought, which is kind of to do with that. So there's abandonment. Now, so many people in our group have major issues with abandonment. It's like one of the big BPD things. I have this majorly as well. So here it's described as please don't leave me. So it's just the belief that anyone that you love and you're connected to will just leave you in the end. And it's a really deep, dark thing which exists in people with BPD, and it can make us act in different ways. Like for some people it makes us like cling on to our relationships too hard because we're scared they're going to end, or sometimes we end them ourselves, or we cut off contact because we think, well, it'll be easier for me to end it, and so I don't have to feel like I'm rejected. So we're kind of self-sabotaging in that way. Well, in both ways it's a self-sabotage. It says here that this can be because sometimes kids are left alone for long periods of their childhood, or sometimes it could just be something like a loss or a bereavement. I mean, I know some of my issues. I actually spoke a little bit about this when I was on Me and My Mental Health, the Channel 5 documentary, and some of mine comes from, I think, when my dad left, which is not no blame on my dad for that. Like my dad's always loved me. Like I've never ever doubted in my whole life that my dad loves me. But when you're young and a big change happens and you do lose someone you're very close to in that sense, I think that might be where it started, and then stuff throughout my life has just built up that huge fear that everyone's going to leave. So yeah, it's really hard going through these. It's reassuring when you're in the group because everyone else, they feel like in similar ways. Like, we're not all the same, but we kind of get it. There's no judgment. So it's a bit weirder going through this talking to you, but I am hoping that if you're watching this, you're someone who either has BPD or you're someone who wants to learn about it, so it won't be quite so embarrassing and exposing. But I need to get over that, to be honest, when I'm doing this series, because I know it's going to get quite, like, deep. Okay, so the third one is mistrust, and it's basically described here as I can't trust you, in quotation marks. So it's just the idea that you just can't trust anyone. Everyone has bad intentions. I suppose it's a kind of like paranoia that people just can't be relied upon ever, and it can come about because maybe the people in your life when you were younger, you couldn't trust them, like they weren't reliable, and now it means that you don't feel like anyone is. You can't trust anyone, like nothing is safe. I think in some ways it also can make us take things personally when they're not meant personally as well, because maybe some of us have experience where there have been abuses of power and abuses of authority in the past. So for some of us, our instant reaction to that because of other experiences is to instantly think, oh my god, it's happening again, no, this can't happen, and you react too much against it, and then it means you kind of kick off when you don't necessarily need to. And you can understand where that comes from when you think about the way your brain has been wired growing up. But yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily have mistrust. Like, I can trust people. I think I'm very hyper aware of people trying to manipulate and control me for reasons. I'm very aware of that very early. So I think in some instances, I don't think I kick off too soon, but I think I notice things too soon. And this is just a perception issue. Like, maybe in some ways, sometimes I do get this wrong, but I actually personally think that's quite a good thing that I have that sense, because I think I'm quite attuned. I'm not usually wrong with that kind of thing, actually, but I know a lot of people do have this. I think in some ways I find this one a little bit easier because I've got people around me that I can kind of talk to and be like, hey, this is the situation, what do you make of this? And I know that they'll tell me their true thoughts. So yeah, I think this one can hopefully be got around just by having a group of people around you who you trust and who you know aren't going to abuse that authority and abuse your friendship and your trust. So, okay, so number 4 is defectiveness and social undesirability, and in quotation marks it says, I am worthless, I don't fit in. Okay, I have this one like super badly, and it basically, it's like the fraud thing. I've spoken about this in terms of like academia and like my work, where you just feel like any praise you get and anything good you do, that you're a fraud. Everything you do is just a fluke. Like, even if you put loads of hard work into it, you just tell yourself, oh, I'm not really that good, and when people know me more, when people find out, oh god, they're going to think I'm an absolute fraud, oh, I'm rubbish, and that's awful. Like, this ties into one later, which is like my biggest one, but I think a lot of us feel like that. It's like this feeling of like, if anyone knew the real you, then they wouldn't actually care about you or love you, and I kind of think it comes from feeling like you've got to be a certain way, like to be palatable to others when you're younger in order to be loved, or you're afraid that not being a certain way will mean you're unloved. And I think that's kind of where it comes from. And I was thinking about this, and I actually think that in the future they need to look into how this ties into issues of like oppression, for example. And I was thinking about it from an LGBT lens, because to me this idea of I am worthless, I don't fit in, I'm flawed or bad or inferior, and I'm hiding my true self, and if people knew they wouldn't like me, I feel like society in some ways actually does that to people who are LGBT. I'm not saying it leads them to borderline personality disorder. I'm pretty sure that being bi and knowing that I liked girls, but knowing that people around me were homophobic, I'm not talking my immediate family, just people in society, I think that gives that a whole new layer if you're someone who's from a minority group, definitely, because it's not just in your head, is it? It's being reflected by all sorts of stuff in society. So I would like to see that looked into a bit more. Okay, number 5 is failure to achieve, and in quotation marks it says, I feel like such a failure. See, for me, I actually got 0 for this one, because it's not because I'm a big head, I swear. I mean, maybe I am a big head, I don't know. But I personally know that I can achieve. And that's actually part of my problem, because I've always been, like I've told you before, I've always been like a very high achiever academically in school. So I've always known I'm good at that, and in some ways that's bad for me, which I'll talk about later. But a lot of people in the group said that they felt like they were stupid or talentless, and like they would fail at anything they tried to do, and that they were just worthless. So it kind of ties into the other one a little bit as well. And yeah, it's very striking when these people are saying that, because there's people in the group who are from all different like walks of life, and for example some of them in the group are parents, and you just think like, no way, like you sound like you're an amazing parent, like you haven't failed, you're not worthless. Like, you're incredible for doing that. And it's like them not being able to see it in themselves makes the whole process better, because it makes you think like, okay, well maybe some of these awful thoughts I have about myself, maybe other people don't think that, you know, maybe it is just me. Something in this one that I do is that some people, they think they're going to fail. They're so convinced they're going to fail that they don't even try. And I suppose that's me in maths. I told you the maths story, haven't I? That like, when I got to like year 8 in school, I just decided that I didn't like maths because I wasn't doing like as well as the people in the top group in maths. And then I just kind of lost my confidence and just kind of gave up and decided I was bad at maths. And then it was a self-fulfilling prophecy, because I was bad at maths, and I did still get my C at GCSE, but I was expected to get an A when I first like started my grammar school. So yeah, I feel like I self-sabotaged that, because I'm sure I was never going to be the best, but I think if I'd worked hard I could have got a B. It reminds me of that Wicked lyric, you know, Fiyero sings in Dancing Through Life. He goes, folks who don't try never look foolish. That is it. It's Fiyero, isn't it, basically? It's that one. Number 6 is vulnerability to harm and illness. This is the word that I can spell, but people tell me I pronounce it wrong, but I always spell it right, so sorry about that. And so basically this is catastrophe is about to strike. And this was actually one of my top 2 for me. And so basically the idea is there's something terrible is always going to happen. So, I mean, I have panic disorder and anxiety as well, so I think this is heightened for me. Like, I am always thinking of the worst case scenarios. Like, because I get panic attacks, I think, oh my god, if I go too far, I'm gonna get sick, I'm gonna get a panic attack. And then that worry actually brings those things on. So I'm kind of fueling that myself. So in this one, it's people who avoid things that might bring them joy because they're so scared that things are going to go wrong and they couldn't deal with that. And again, it's that thing with feeling like you don't have the tools to cope on your own. So if something did go wrong, you'd feel like, oh my god, I need someone to save me. Like, you feel like you couldn't save yourself. And that's a really tough realisation to have when you're an adult, because, like I say, I'm adult in so many ways, but I don't feel like that ability to save myself. I don't want to be like someone who's thinking, oh, someone will save me if I'm in trouble. Like, I want to be able to save myself. I want to be able to do that. I want to have the confidence to know that if something goes wrong, it's not the end of the world, and I'll find a way around it and I'll be okay. But I'm not there yet at all. I'm scared of everything, you know that. It says here that this filter might have started after a significant trauma, such as an illness or the loss of an important person. So maybe this is to do with when my dad left. I don't know. I've got no idea. I mean, I was on and off ill when I was younger. I was depressed when I was younger, and I had I had 2 breakdowns when I was a kid that we didn't realise were breakdowns, but I just would not get out of bed and just cried every day, and used to write in my little diaries as a child about how I wanted to die. Very distressing when you think about it as an adult, because you suddenly think, oh wow, I was very young and very disturbed. So number 7 is self-sacrifice. So it says here, other people are more important than me and must be put first. This was my one of my joint top ones for me, because now I understood this in this session like I never have before, and I don't know what it was that made this click in my head, but I had this moment in the session. And I have I'm going to get to it later in more depth, but basically my biggest issue is perfectionism, where I feel like I have to be perfect all the time, otherwise I failed, and I will talk about that later. But it kind of ties into, I never even realised these things linked, but it links to this idea of being self-sacrificing, this idea that if I do things for others and I put other people first and I get them nice things and I'm always there for them and I always forgive them and I always let them talk to me in a certain way sometimes, then they'll love me and they'll like me. And it's almost a fear of, if I assert my own identity, they're not going to love me anymore, which is awful and horrible. And to be honest, I can't even explain where that one's come from, because I mean, my my family are quite they've always brought us up to be very independent. Like, you know, I'm a weird mixture. It probably sounds weird me saying this, because I'm extremely independent when it comes to politics and when it comes to stating my opinions. Like, I assert my identity very fiercely. I cling to it, maybe in some ways a bit too hard, because people with BPD, we can struggle with an idea of identity. But yeah, I think sometimes it's so hard to focus on your own issues, which is in some ways, maybe that's what I do online. Like, it's so hard to focus on your own issues sometimes that it's easier to help other people with theirs, or to talk about things generally and kind of try and help other people, which maybe is what I'm doing with the channel. But I think in moderation it's good. I feel like I just have to remember to kind of maybe help myself along the way, because I feel like, yeah, I kind of step back for other people, like in just casual dynamics, you know, depending on who I'm with. Like in conversation dynamics with people I really care about, I often like let them take the lead, and it's what they want to do, and it's just, yeah, it's not their fault. It's just that it's like I don't assert myself properly. I don't say, well, actually, I don't really want to do this, or, oh, actually, I disagree. It's because of that fear of being like, oh god, you're not gonna love me anymore. So that probably sounds like such a weird one for me, because you know my personality, but it is true in my personal life, which again sounds weird because it's not what I'm like online at all. But I feel like online is my space where I can be more independent and things aren't so at risk, because I feel like you guys know me through the mental health issues and, you know, for the opinions and that sort of thing. But it's different, isn't it? These kind of things are very different in personal life. I think other people who do YouTube might understand the dynamics can be so much harder in real life. Oh, here we go, number 8, subjugation. I'll always do it your way. So this one says here, you believe you must submit to others in order to avoid negative consequences. Now, this is, yeah, you see, I'm an odd mixture, because for this one I scored 0. Now, I scored a very high score for self-sacrifice, because I do put other people before myself in some ways, which is selfish, because I'm doing it in some ways that's kind of done for myself, because it's like, I don't have to worry about my problems, I can feel good by helping other people, so in a way that's kind of giving me a kick, isn't it? Don't think too deeply into these things, friends, you'll go mad. But yeah, a lot of people in the group really related to this idea of subjugation, where they just completely just went along with everyone else in order to be accepted and to be liked. And I can understand, like, for me personally, in some personal relationships, I can definitely be like that, and it comes from, again, the fear of being left and the fear of being unlovable. And if I do or say something they don't like, they will hate me and they won't love me anymore, like that, which is way too much of an extreme way to think. But yeah, I have that in my personal relationships, but not in general. Like, in general, you know that I'm actually the other way. Like, I'm almost, sometimes I'm too combative and too sort of, wait a minute, let me assert my own opinion here, like, let me assert my independence. Which again, I know why that is and why I'm not great with authority figures sometimes, because sometimes authority figures can abuse power and I have no tolerance for that whatsoever. But yeah. Okay, so we have reached number 9, which is unrelenting standards. And this one was my top rated one when I did the test, and I think it's right. And it's basically perfectionism. So it's basically a feeling like you have to be perfect in every way, otherwise people won't love you anymore. And I think academically, I feel like I have to achieve the absolute best. Like, I got a distinction in my first year of my course, and when I don't hit the distinction grade, when I'm on like a merit grade, I get really upset with myself, and I feel like, well, clearly I didn't work hard enough and I should have done better. And what they were saying in the session today was, thinking like that just sets yourself up for failure, doesn't it? Like, it doesn't reward your hard work. Nobody can be perfect 100% of the time. Now, the reason this exists in me, personal story time, is my family are very educational oriented, with like my grandma and granddad. So my granddad is a doctor, my grandma was a teacher, and it's not their fault that I've taken it to this level. It's just that that's something that we were always praised for, especially me, you know, being very clever academically. I always achieved very highly and people were very proud of me, not in an unhealthy way at all. It's me that made that unhealthy. But I think this thing with dad going and having that sense of loss, and there were times when mum wasn't always emotionally present through no fault of her own, I think it just made me feel like well, this is a way I can use this, and this is a way that people will love me, because that can be my thing. I'll get perfect grades and I'll be so well behaved. And I remember at school, if I got told off for anything, like the smallest thing, I never got in trouble in a big way when I was like younger at school, I would weep when I got home. I'd be devastated. I remember there was I was young, it was a colouring activity, and my teacher had written in reception something like, "You could have done this more neatly." And I remember Mum coming in on Parents' Day to look in my tray, and I tried to skip past the page, and I just sat there and I felt, oh God, I felt like I could cry sitting there. And I think Mum kind of said, you know, like, it wasn't such a big deal to her. She was kind of like, oh, well, you know, make sure that you try to, you know, always try your best and that sort of thing. But for me, it felt like the absolute end of the world. So I think when I was younger, I was a bit of a Hermione Granger. This is before I went rebellious, by the way. This is before I kicked off authority figures majorly. Only the ones that abuse power, by the way. I have no issue with authority figures that do things fairly and justly. But yeah, I felt like being really well mannered and being really selfless and being that person, like getting good grades, being the ideal daughter and granddaughter, and I thought that would make the rest of my family want to stay with me. And you don't even realise you think like that when you're younger, but I think that's what I was thinking, and that was so messed up. I can't even believe that my brain went to that place, and I think that's where it is now. I know that isn't true, but I still have the lingering feeling that I have to be perfect. I have to be that. It's going to be really hard to let go of that, I think. That's going to be a real struggle for me. I remember I used to get so nervous doing ballet exams. I used to do ballet when I was younger, and one time during an exam, before exams, I got so ill. I got upset stomachs, I shook, I didn't want to go, I cried in the car, constantly. Every time there was an exam, I used to dread it. And one time I locked myself in a toilet and just cried and shook, and the amount of pressure it makes so much sense, and I feel so sorry for a little version of me, and it's no one's fault, because there's no way my family could possibly have put this stuff together, because it made no sense. But I think it was like some sort of delayed reaction to Dad leaving, and there was other weird stuff in the family. Like there's this odd part of our family that just kind of disappears off sometimes and then comes back in and disappears and just are very hostile and odd. And I think that kind of had an effect where it felt like, oh God, things are always shifting, people are leaving, people are coming back, nothing's stable. But if I'm really good, people will stay and people will love me. And yeah, that's not because my family pushed me too hard. They've always been really encouraging in terms of all that kind of thing. But yeah, I can see why that happened. And the last one here is entitlement. So it's, I can have whatever I want. I didn't score anything for this one either, but some people did, and it's some people here believe that they should be able to do, say, or have whatever they want, like right now, and it can make them very demanding and self-focused, and it's not something that I personally have, but some people in the group did have this. Apparently it's a way to be able to assert control over people, like not in like a scary way, but just that sort of dynamic, which is really interesting. Apparently it can come about through negative life experiences, so I suppose I can imagine somebody starting to think like that if they have had negative experiences with authority figures, for example, and people like demanding things of them and thinking, okay, well, I'm gonna demand that of others. You know, I can understand that happening. So that's not really a thing for me, but other people experience that. So that was very interesting to hear about. So our homework for this week is basically we have to think about these thoughts that come in to do with these things, and then we have to think of thoughts that challenge them, because we've got the initial thought, the filter, and then we have to challenge it. So there are these posts online, you know, about like self-care, and you know how people think those posts are silly, like people post things like, you're lovable, just remember that you're worth so much, but actually they really do work. If you're someone with these initial issues, these filters that are so negative, it's the second thought that matters. So the thought that you've grown up thinking will be there, but what we can do is we can say, wait a minute, I know what's happening here, I know what my brain's doing, no, this is the reality, and then you reassure yourself. So for example, if an issue you have is thinking, oh, nobody's ever going to love me, no one's ever going to be there for me, I'm worthless and I'm unlovable, what you immediately would say to yourself, for example, is, well, wait a minute, let me think about all the people who care about me. Like, that can't be true. That's something I've learned and something that's wrong. I know people care about me because you've got family who care about you and friends who care about you. So yeah, that's the kind of homework assignment. So there's quite a lot of it to do for all of them, but yeah, I'm looking forward to kind of working through it. I did find the session very helpful today. I think it's given me a lot of sort of optimism, actually, because it can be depressing when you realise, oh my god, my brain is wired so wrong, like how did that go so wrong? And well, I know, like there's stuff which happens when you're younger and then that gets sort of backed up throughout your life, other negative stuff, and it all rolls into one and it just creates a mess. And it's like you kind of don't realise how messed up your thought processes have been this whole time. And it helps you understand, like I said last week about how are other people coping and I'm not? Well, it's because they grew up thinking about stuff rationally. Like, they didn't have to develop these things to exist. You know, they didn't have to have these sort of survival techniques to keep existing when they were younger. So that's why. It doesn't feel like this guilt thing, really, thinking about it like that. It makes sense. And that's the best thing I've learned from this. It just makes it all make sense. It's not so weird. It's not like, oh, I'm a crazy person. It's, oh, actually, if you think about where that came from and the responses and what's happened, that actually makes perfect sense. And if that makes perfect sense, then it also makes sense to be able to say, right, I'm going to have those thoughts, but I'm also going to recondition myself. So I'm going to be able to just hit back at them every time something happens. So something which I get is sometimes I am going to wrap this up in a minute because this is so long and my mum's going to be back from work soon. But I get sometimes when I feel down, I feel like I'm an evil, bad person, and I feel like, oh god, I'm actually awful, and I want to delete myself from life. And you know, I sometimes I come off the internet for a little while, and it's because I feel like I'm an evil person, and I need to just disappear from the world. Like, I can offer nothing. I hate myself. I don't want to be here. Like, it's literally just feeling like I want to erase myself from time and space. And I get that so strongly, and I really want to be able to say to myself when that happens, okay, so I'm feeling like this, but wait, let's think about all the things that are good. Let's think about all the good qualities about myself, you know, what nice things have I done, and, you know, what can I do in the future, and I guess it's just thinking not so in the moment, which is essentially the issue, isn't it, with BPD? But I'm hoping it will come. I'm really hoping that my brain will be able to do that. Yeah, I'm going to be patient with the process. I've had a couple of realisations today which surprised me quite a lot, which I wasn't really expecting. And yeah, I continue to feel quite comfortable in the group. It does feel quite safe, and they always give me that seat by the door. I was called to sit there today as well, so much of my anxiety is kind of chilled by the fact I know I can get out so easily. There's a toilet right outside, so if I freak out and I get a panic attack, it's okay. I can just go out and come back in when I want, and there's no stress because we're all adults. So that is a huge relief to me, and it's definitely the right time in my life to do this. So I'm gonna go. Hope I don't get done for copyright. I have rephrased everything. I'm just talking about my interpretation and what I have learned. Again, this is what I'm saying is not like, don't think, oh, that's the steps program, because again, it's my interpretation and what I've got from it, which is obviously not 100%. It's just what I'm learning. This is more of a person going through the process, telling you what they learn as they go along. Yeah, so I'll see you next week. Oh, by the way, I just thought I'd show you since I'm here. I got this is a skirt I got from eBay, and this top is also from eBay. And in case you hadn't noticed, I get people who just watch this for the mental health stuff and don't watch my other stuff or follow me on other social media, which is probably wise. I'm a bit Emmerdale obsessed. And yeah, by the way, these portraits here are all Emmerdale, and they're by an artist called Jenny Sliff from America. She's amazing. And also Emmerdale. Watch Emmerdale. It's great. But yeah, I do dress basically like one of the old characters from Emmerdale, because it's not because I'm a crazy person, it's because I don't get out much, I watch a lot of TV, so whereas most people look in a magazine and think, oh, that outfit that celebrity wore, I like it, I want it. Mine just so happens to be TV characters most of the time, so if I see something I like on someone, I'm like, ah, that. And it means I end up dressing like fictional characters. But it's not as weird as it sounds. It's because I don't do magazines and all that kind of stuff. And I try to stay away from like Instagram fashion, because I feel like that makes me feel like, it makes me feel inadequate and awful. So yeah, this is my, again, another Rebecca outfit. It's all Zara, friends. It's all eBay Zara. Yeah. Okay, so I love you loads. I will see you next week. For another vlog, and hopefully I'll be just as cheerful and not crying. If there's no crying in this vlog series, it's been a success. So it's still a success if I cry. I'm being perfectionistic again. Okay, love you loads, and I will see you really soon. Hope the light's not too bad. Okay, love you. Bye.